almost every level of public life in Ireland. May I now respectfully invite His Excellency the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, to address the ceremony. Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, Madam, dear friends and members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Oireachtas, I'm so pleased to see you here, and dear friends of Nepal. I'm very deeply honoured to have my work translated into Nepali by a very distinguished scholar and translator, His Excellency the Ambassador of Nepal. I have looked at his long contributions in so many different areas, and indeed the long list of awards which his own work in poetry has received. It put me in mind also to say how fortunate Nepal is in having a member of their diplomatic corps with such a distinguished literary, not just achievement, but capacity. Puts me in mind also of the history of the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs in those days when Valentin Ironmonger was translating our own ancient Celtic work with such distinction. But I'm honoured to join all of you this evening as we together commemorate just the beginning of the 20th year of diplomatic relations between Nepal and Ireland, and as we celebrate what is becoming an deepening and enduring bond between the peoples of our nations. I want to express my gratitude too for the extraordinary grace and beauty of the reception which Sabine and I received as we arrived. It is something that I had associated with Nepal, and it's something that is a great reminder to us of the emphasis that the Nepalese people, those 29 million people who live on the roof of the world, of what attachment they have to the things that are things of beauty, and also of how they remind us too of the responsibilities that we have in relation to the future of our planet. Ambassador Sabedi took on the task of translating my poems, and I want to thank him for what is always a difficult task. John Millington Singh once said in translating, he received advice from an Islander when he was attempting to translate some work, and the Islander said to him, "You must listen to the music first and then look after the words." I think what is interesting, we sometimes forget, is that that time and that island to which Singh related had in the generation before it people who were familiar with all of the Greek myths. They would speak to each other, for example, they would speak disparagingly of people who didn't know their roots. And the Prevaka, the roots they were speaking of, were Greek roots. Those people were familiar with the Greek roots, they were familiar with Latin, they were familiar with Irish and familiar with English. And that reminds me then of something which we do share. Nepal is between two great neighbours, which has advantages and disadvantages in the case of China and India. And I want to say, therefore, that we share many characteristics of dealing with the influence of great neighbours. What I have just been speaking in relation to the Irish language was the suppression of an indigenous culture. And it was without doubt also something that was very, very important. How do you do that without asserting the superiority of another culture? And I thought, we do not, thankfully, now, in better relations, east-west and north-south, I hope, have to choose between Shakespeare and Raftery, or between the great achievements in Chaucer and those who were writing in another language in our own country. think that gives an immense significance to the arrival among the constitutional documents of the world of the Constitution of Nepal 3 years ago, which is an exemplary document in terms of its inclusion. I think it draws on something that is there standing in the background and something that which Ireland shares, a profound, deep, diverse cultural inheritance, because it is one of the achievements of Ireland in relation to its, after the second half of the 19th century, its relationship to the English language is to take it and rework it and to create an entirely new form, which has the more maybe practical achievement of having 4 Nobel Prizes in writing in English, and 5 if you put Eugene O'Neill in, who was really quite influenced by the Irish canon. I think as well in relation to constitutions, I was thinking about the Nepalese constitution, which in terms of recent constitutional documents, probably another great constitutional document is the Constitution of South Africa. And I'm so pleased that there's so many of our diplomats here in attendance this evening. But these documents are in fact inviting us to think of the balances that are necessary in constitutional documents. And maybe it's a useful reminder as we're on the eve of celebrating one of our own most important documents, because we're the inheritors of 3 constitutional documents. The Provisional Constitution of the First Dáil, which we'll celebrate next year, is a very, very important document. It is a document, perhaps, that we didn't go on to fulfill its promise. And then, of course, there is the second constitution, the Constitution of the Free State, but which still, in a way, as in relation to the possession of women, is better maybe than the Constitution of 1937. So in a way, discussing constitutions and their forms and shapes and amendments is something that we can do with great benefit. The Nepalese Constitution of 2015, as I've said, is a model in terms of its inclusiveness. Now, both in relation to ethnicity, in relation to language, in relation to diversity, in relation to LGBT rights, and something else which I think is extraordinarily impressive in everything that I have read about Nepal, and that is its emphasis on the immaterial. If at the end of the ceremonies we say to people bow to each other and say namaste, it is in fact an acknowledgement of the spirit and the unity which everyone seeks to try and to create a balance and equanimity in their life and symmetry in relation to what is material. I think what is very important here too is what we have shared with Nepal in the wider world. Sometimes in relation to our foreign policy, and I very much realise I'm in the presence of so many members of the diplomatic corps. Comparisons between countries are not best made in relation to capacities for destruction. That is why it is never a great achievement when Ireland is invited, or when countries are invited, African countries where arms are not produced, but where arms are purchased and used with such destructive havoc on people and so forth. So the technology that is distorted and the science that is abused in the preparation of war somehow appears as a very dark shadow on human achievement. And that is why when we have, for example, even in Lebanon at the present time, our soldiers are serving as peacemakers, because what we have is a defense force, not an aggressive force. And they are side by side with each other, building and achieving peace. And this is something upon which we can do a very, very great deal more in our relationship between our peoples and our governments. And it gives me the greatest pleasure to see former colleagues and members of the Iraq this year. It was in 1982, I recall, writing an article making the case for a elected political involvement in foreign policy. There was a different view. I remember Professor Steerkamp of Holland was one of the people who held this view, and was quoted by a very dear, distinguished colleague of mine, Professor Doug, who argued really we should leave foreign policy to the experts. I strongly of the view It is when you have people understanding and exchanging views in relation to foreign policy, it becomes all the richer for that. Slowly a foreign policy committee emerged, and now it is just so important that we have in fact parliamentary friendship groups between Ireland and Nepal. And I thank all of those other colleagues who have in fact been very committed to that view. I think something else as well, that in relation to the opportunities that are there, Nepal, you mentioned, I think, the 49 people who have arrived at the top of Everest. I never anymore really like to hear references people speaking conquering mountains, because the word conquer is the wrong word. If you have arrived at the roof of the world, your impulse is not to dominate anything, but to experience the incredible majesty of the planet for which we have responsibility. A planet 4.5 billion years old, which has been put at immense risk by assumptions in relation to economy and industry that are less than 250 years old. And then the great glaciers and the Himalayas and all of the others, they're reminders to us that we have to think and behave globally, reminding us as well that it is even perhaps for some to climb up Everest, it might be more difficult yet to enable those governments who have signed agreements in relation to climate change and in relation to sustainability to actually turn their words into actions. It's something we have to do for the sake of it's an intergenerational justice issue. I think as well, Nepal and Ireland, if we have in the 20th year of our diplomatic relations, we join the United Nations on the same day. And that is another important venture. I was very sad to hear today, as I'm sure you were, of the passing of Kofi Annan, who had spent most of his adult life working the different institutions of the United Nations and made such a commitment to the multilateral system. Ireland and Nepal, side by side in relation to the importance of the multilateral system, share so much in common. As I've already referred to the fact of our soldiers serving together in the United Nations Interim Force, for example, in UNIFIL at the level. I must say, I want to say to the Nepalese community in Ireland, thank you for coming and enriching our culture and our people. And I must say too, thank you for what you bring with you in relation to that great richness of different belief systems and different cultures and different appreciations of the natural environment. It is in a way, I think, the people who have thought more and spoke about the inner life of people. Isn't it an interesting thing in the constitutional discussions which preceded the Nepalese constitution, the amount of time that was given to the discussion of happiness? In fact, actually, a former student of mine worked in an offshoot of the World Bank's consideration of the future of the economy. It was there that you had the first arrival in World Bank indicators of the happiness index, with its assumptions, in fact, that social cohesion, global cohesion, is such an important value. If this might appear in any sense, it isn't soft at all. It is, in fact, something that is really at the challenging side of diplomacy. It is at the challenging side of international affairs. And it is about turning what the agony of the world asks us to do, which is to be responsible in relation to how we handle issues of consumption on one side of in relation to, and on the other in relation to sustainability. I very much appreciate, Ambassador, the invitation you make to Irish people to visit Nepal. And my wish for you in that is that many, many will go, and that they will go with a sense of ethical purpose, of engaging with people that has such a vast experience of culture and of a relationship to nature. Not using languages of conquering or of consumption, but of coming and relating to the people of Nepal, where over 80% of that 29 million people live in rural settings, divided as they are when one looks at the the ecological structure of Nepal itself. And I hope that the visitors you get, that they will come with a whisper, and I hope that they will deliver you an ecological tourism that will enable to fit very well with the new possibilities that are there from the immense uses of water, that great resource of which our planet is exhausting its supply, in relation to we all will depend on how in fact the MLAs are treated and what happens to the glaciers, and also that feed in turn the rivers, which create great possibilities in relation to hydroelectric capacity. So if the tourism is in fact actually the new responsible tourism, I hope many Irish technologists and scientists will also seek and see Nepal as a place to practice the proper, very valuable, long-term versions of the applications of science and technology, and particularly delivered through green technologies and industries. These great rivers fed by the glaciers of the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau are so important to all of us, reminding us of the great responsibility we have. In fact, actually, it is barely sufficient to maintain the increase in global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. Seems now almost a desperate gesture, something that we have not been able to sufficiently critique until now. So I wish us all well in relation to what we share. We are invited in our relationships with Nepal to a relationship with sustainable beauty, a relationship of balance between life and happiness and development and interdependency and vulnerability. Because in the end, as I often point out, and I don't like some of the words used to describe them, all of those who have in fact gone to the top of Everest, they have been more than helped along the way, and often in a great indication of Nepalese culture and generosity. Nepalese people have stood back so that those who needed the excitement of the notoriety and the achievement might in fact have it. I want to say the vast distance that separates Nepal and Ireland, I think, should never separate us in relation to what it is that we might do together. I thank you for your use of my words, and indeed you honor deeply by your translation. I thank you, and through you send to the Nepalese President and send to the people of the land the warmest greetings. Let us resolve to continue our work together, not just as we have been doing it, but doing so much more in all of the fields of human endeavour, in culture and science and technology, ecological economics and in diplomacy. Is míle buíochas as an fíorcin fóilse ar tú rógin is ver ma ban cléir. Tigam gomóra na anartó tá tú brona ma abertrí eis tú godi na cléir. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your invaluable address. We believe that